Okay, I'll call the meeting of Lowell Light and Power, April 12th, 2018, to order, and roll call.
Chairman Beecham.
Here.
Schraben.
Here.
Cadwalder.
Here.
Dickerman.
Here.
Van Kulen.
Here.
Present.
Okay, is there any changes to the agenda?
I do have an addition.
Okay.
A 5F, voluntary green pricing program rate adoption. More of a formality. We talked about it last month, but figured it probably should go to the board for ultimate approval.
Okay. So with that change, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda as amended. Second.
It's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Approval of the minutes of the March 8th, 2018 regular board meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the March 8th board meeting minutes.
And I'll support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Public comment. Mr. Drew?
All good, thank you.
You're good? All right. We'll move on to action items, and I'll let Steve take it from there.
First action item tonight is From's food fight assistance approval. Since 2013, Lowell Light and Power staff, I'm going to give a lot of the credit to Sharon and our line staff. We've assisted From in dropping off buckets and bins and picking those up at the end of food fight, as well as making stops at the participating businesses a couple times a week for the duration of food fight, and it works out well because we have the trucks and people here to contribute to that. From is once again requesting our assistance. However, with all that being said, we actually do have a benevolence policy 5-9, which I've included in your packet, which spells out how Lowell Light and Power is to go about approving benevolence. In the past, there's always been board awareness and a consensus that this was an okay thing for us to be doing. But really, to follow our policy, we need to get a written letter and have formal approval through board action at a meeting. So we asked From to write us a letter, and that's included in your packet tonight. I did want to note that we estimate we're actually going to spend 35 to 42 hours for the 6 weeks of food fight, assisting if we were to do that. And that total contribution, labor, overhead, trucks, fuel, comes somewhere in the ballpark of $1,400 to $1,700. According to our policy, we do have a $1,000 limit per organization that we're allowed to contribute to, and a $5,000 maximum limit in any fiscal year. The other couple organizations we typically help are Pink Arrow and the Chamber. So in total, between those three organizations, I don't think we will get anywhere close to going over our $5,000 limit. So it's ultimately the board's decision how to proceed. Staff would be willing to proceed and help out once again. Sharon said she's being willing to, and over the years, and I'll let Sharon speak to this, it is being run more efficiently. And she has it down in terms of the stops and the pickups and the email coordination with businesses. So I don't know if you want to chime in there.
When we first started this, we had about 50 locations that had barrels and collection sites. And each year it gets a little bit less. And last year we had 12. And out of that, we didn't pick up a lot of food. Kind of at the end, more so, people would have their buckets full or whatever. But it seems, From did think that this was going to be probably the last year of food collection, because more people are writing checks and making donations that way.
So yeah, food fight will likely continue, but I think they can even spend the dollars more efficiently because they're buying bulk.
They
So
can,
they encourage
right.
people just to
Yeah.
donate money, and that's what people tend to do.
Yeah, so they think this is going to be the last year that they're going to actually collect food.
So ultimately the decisions is the board's. Just wanted to be transparent with how many dollars in contributions we'd be potentially contributing, and at the same time, it is over that threshold, but it's under the $5,000 limit.
Do we need a motion?
Yes.
I would move that we override our $1,000 limit and support Food Fight this year again.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 I keep,
Making sure we're.
the city keeps on doing, I get screwed up. Opposed? Motion carried.
C.
The one thing, I think, if you could come back and report to us, when was the last time the benevolence policy 5-9 was updated? And only, again, if it's something that's been there forever and it's, you know, it's 40 years, 50 years, 100 years old, that amount, again, you know, as things change, maybe we should look at addressing that, so that we're not having to override all the
Right.
time. And
I saw that
That's
was
right at the
reviewed
bottom, yeah.
What?
in 2015.
Reviewed in 2015 and revised 2009.
okay,
And there's a high probability, though, that that revision may have not been the dollar amount. We can go back
Yeah,
and
probably.
try and track that, and it is timely because I am making a number of recommendations that do involve increasing thresholds or limits, so it would probably be appropriate to look at this in the near future as well.
okay,
And for the record, this is not a dollar spend, it's actually just a use of current resources.
Correct.
Yeah.
More of an opportunity cost that staff could be doing other things with their time.
Right.
Any other questions or comments on Food Fight? If not, we will go to the second action item. The potential adoption for a tree trimming policy on private property. From time to time, it's necessary, even critical, for us to trim or cut down trees on private property. For obvious reasons, there can be times where limbs have fallen, taken out service, damaged equipment. It looks like limbs are going to fall or damage equipment. We've actually run into this a couple times since December, where there's trees on private property. What do we do or what do we not do? Historically, we just have taken the stance that we're not going to trim any trees on service drops or secondary on private property. We'll disconnect service to their house, and the resident can then take it upon themselves to either trim or hiring a contractor to trim those trees. The last couple situations that have happened, you know, I brought up to Mark and Ryan, and we had actually a pretty great conversation. From the residents or the ratepayers' perspective, I think they view us, hey, this tree is gonna fall, or this tree or limbs on my property is gonna fall on your guys' equipment, wire, etc., which will take out service to my house, and you, the utility, have a mission to provide safe, reliable electric service, and this limb is potentially threatening that. Why wouldn't you be willing to trim a tree on my property if I'm authorizing you to, and that's the potential of threatening service? So Anna, Ryan, and I took it upon ourselves, and there really wasn't a huge precedent for this, but we wanted to customize it more towards Lowell. A lot of the bigger guys just say we're not going to get in that business, and this isn't very frequent. It's not like we're dealing with this all the time. And the intention of this is for us not, we do not want to become a tree trimming company for everybody who wants their trees trimmed. So if you read this policy, the goal is one of the three things needs to be present. A tree or portion of a tree has already fallen, causing a loss of power to the property, owner's dwelling or facility. A tree or portion of a tree is broken and or dead at the sole discretion of the Lowell Light and Power staff poses a realistic threat to cause the loss or interruption of power supply. A tree or portion of a tree is broken or dead at the sole discretion of Lowell Light and Power staff poses a realistic threat to Lowell Light and Power's infrastructure. So one of those three things would need to be present, as well as the owner's authorization and willingness to sign a release form for us to be able to trim. Does that make sense? Trim or cut down. So if it doesn't pose a threat under our staff's determination that, no, really this tree's alive, yep, it's over some wires, it's over some equipment, but there's not a chance of it really falling, and you can't trim every live tree, we're not gonna do it. If it's dead, but there's no realistic possibility of hitting our lines or taking out service, we're not gonna trim it, because we don't wanna be in the tree trimming business. This is really something to allow us to continue to provide reliable electric service, and I posed the question to Ryan, if this was a large business that used a bunch of power, we wouldn't want them to be out of power for a second, because every second they're online, there's money coming to the utility. And if it was a large customer, we would really be incentivized to make sure everything is proper so we can continue to provide electric service to them. So this might play out, most of the time this is only gonna play out on the residential side. I mean, just the fact that 2,300 residential customers, 400 commercial customers. But we just thought we should be consistent across the board, so that's the rationale and the goal behind the policy.
How much will that cost? The first thing out of my mouth as a homeowner, I would say, wow, you'll do that? Well, how much is that gonna cost me?
We would just do it. We would do it on our dime if these qualifications were met, because our goal is again to provide electric service, and if it took down the line, it could damage our infrastructure and ultimately cost us money anyway.
Okay.
They did that at my house 7, 8 years ago. Did a tree out front on Fremont. Got hit by lightning. Top died on it. It started to look like it was leaning, and I called down here. Yep, we'll send somebody out there and look at it. Next thing I know, they're hacking the whole tree down. I said, yeah, it's not ground.
I didn't know that was an opportunity.
How do you give the homeowners consent or acknowledgement that this work is going to be done?
We would,
Get written?
with this I haven't done yet, we would have a formal release letter,
Okay.
like indemnifying us or waiving us of any liability. Like almost like a legal contract by an attorney. We wouldn't trim without,
Unless they sign.
unless that.
I think, wasn't there a problem with Ivan? I don't know if that was, I think that was actually on the
That was a city,
city.
that was in the right of way, that was, and that, that was more of a DPW thing than it was like,
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
So we want to make sure that the homeowner acknowledges and accepts the work to be done before we ever do it.
Right, and we really don't, I mean, if it's on private property, not in the right of way, if it's a service drop or secondary, we don't have the right now.
And I think for the most part, our guys are not, I don't think are purposely going around and looking at all the secondary lines and going, oh, we better get that one trimmed. I think it's gonna be more of a homeowner's gonna contact you and say, hey, we got this branch coming over here, or, I mean, I've done it, driving neighbors, you know, it looked like it was gonna fall on the lines, and I called our office, and they said, yeah, we'll go out and take a look at it. So for the most part, I think it's gonna be the homeowner is gonna say, yeah, geez, I got an issue here, and so I think signing the release, I think they're gonna and the most time, they're gonna contact us.
Ryan or Mark, would you agree with that? When we're not going to seek out every single person's private property trees on this.
Right, unless we run across it,
Yeah.
but most times it's gonna be on them to call.
And right now, we really don't have anything in place to do that. We just kind of done it, or situation by situation, but at least let's give staff some guidelines on how to go about trimming on, or cutting down trees on private property.
In reading this, the only thing that I would like to change is the last line. And I would like to have some quantitative, because for what one person thinks is a large branch or large debris, and another person's not. I mean, I would like to, I'd like the recommendation of Mark and Ryan of, are we talking anything larger than a 3-inch diameter? Are we talking about, you know, because it basically says we're gonna dispose of large debris. I'm assuming, so the little branches and the stuff, it's gonna be up to the homeowner to rake it up and get rid of it. But I guess I'm looking, you know, to be able to say, we're gonna take care of anything that is larger than 3 inches in diameter, the rest of it's gonna be up to the homeowner. I mean, if that's your intent.
And that might be something to go into the contract that the attorney drafts, so that our agreement with the homeowner is specific like that. Do you think it needs to be in our policy?
Well, I just don't wanna arbitrarily go on, well, the Lowell and Power, they came and they cut this down and they didn't clean up or whatever. You know, because the intent is we're gonna clean up. By reading this, I haven't talked to anybody, but think the intent of this is we're gonna do this homeowner a favor. I mean, we're gonna, I shouldn't say a favor, we're going to make sure that power is, you know, is gonna continue to be available at their house. Dead tree, limb that looks like it's gonna fall on the lines. I just want that homeowner to be able to, you know, for us to be able to say, we're gonna clean this up. We're gonna take away the big debris unless you say you want that lumber, wood. Otherwise, we're gonna haul this portion, but you're gonna be responsible for raking up the twigs and that type of thing. I mean, I'm throwing it up to Ryan and Mark. I don't know what you're.
A lot of times,
They do want it.
yeah, they want it, or they say if you cut it down, we'll clean it up, and that's where the permission, the signature will be specified. A lot of people clean it up because it's on private property, so if they sign a thing, whether we clean it up or not, that'll be all in that.
And the attorney could write a paragraph in there, it's like a checkbox, you know, I will retain responsibility for, you know, the wood, or LL&P will remove anything larger than 3 inches, say.
Do you think we should say Lowell Power remove and dispose of all branches greater than?
I don't
we
know.
want it
I'm
to
just.
there unless otherwise waived or specified in the agreement, and we'll label that agreement in this policy.
I think getting to a number like a diameter is getting a bit legalistic. So maybe more a description of what would be left behind, like twigs, leaves, sawdust. And anything larger would be removed unless specified by the customer.
It really doesn't take a whole lot to just clean up after ourselves, and we usually do that, and it's not really a big deal. I mean, we have all the tools to do it, and it just, I'd rather clean it up and just be done with it than to have to drive by it for minutes and see that it's still there.
Then that's.
But when I read this, I got the impression it was saying that, hey, we're gonna take most of it away, that there's gonna be leaves and sticks, but
Yeah, I don't want
They
somebody
don't have to worry
complaining
about
with
the
every
fact you've got,
speck
you
of
know,
sawdust.
you know, big logs sitting there.
Right.
But I do think, you know, as you were talking, I was kind of thinking maybe just a general description.
Or a couple examples.
Yeah, or just like I said, leaves, twigs, or, you know, small branches, or even just something to say if the homeowner wants them removed. Just so that it's an option for folks to keep it.
Who typically is the face of this with the customer? Would it be you, or are you working with them?
Usually Mark or myself, yeah.
So there would be decent communication typically, there has been up front.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
How to proceed, what to do. Good, yeah.
Okay.
So
I think it needs some more description. Do you want me to come back to the board with that language?
Well, I'm just throwing that out.
I think you can put that, I think you could actually put that in the form to be drafted, the agreement to be drafted with the homeowner. In
Okay.
other words, put those types of details where they belong in the legal document, not in the policy. That make sense?
Yep, I understand.
the other question I had was things like if you have to use a truck on the property and there's like ruts or something, do we have to fix those, or would we just not go in there until the ground's better, or?
Well, the indemnification language and release of liability, my intent was, I mean, obviously we do something completely negligent, run
Like
into
do
their
donuts,
house.
yeah.
Don't know this arc. But normal wear and tear that happens in the course of tree trimming, they
Right.
would, we're not, I mean, if we have to drive a big truck, we're gonna have that conversation done beforehand, that this is a possibility, that might be some indentation, stuff like that.
Okay.
I think overall, the policy's a good idea because we want to keep our uptime as close to 100% as we can get. So it makes a lot of sense to help a homeowner when there's that threat to bring it down below 100%. So
It's being preemptive instead of reactionary.
And frankly, we're small enough and nimble enough to be able to respond to stuff like this, and it's not like we have 20,000 customers where you're gonna have this every week.
What currently happens if a tree does take out a line of property? Like, do we just automatically go in and start cleaning it up to restore power?
On private property,
Mm-hmm.
the wire would probably be just cut either side of that tree, put it out over the top of it, reinstall the wire, and then the homeowner can take care of business after that.
Okay.
But again, this caused us a problem because there was actually, same customer, tree was dead. Tree limb fell, took out service, so AR reliability sort, and, potential damage for equipment. They've had an electrician do what they need to do with the house, put right back up the wire. Happens again. So if the customer doesn't take action because of their potential financial situation or they don't want to do something, we could keep having outages, even though they're willing to let us take the tree down, they might just not have the means to do that.
Right.
And there's the possibility of eventually damaging equipment, transformers, poles, whatever might be near there or near the tree. So this is a way to prevent that and allow us to have some sort of legal document to go in there, take down the tree, and they're authorizing us to do that.
How much of our network, I guess, is on private property versus right of way?
Oh, gosh.
A lot of it. I mean, because we're talking about
Yeah.
the secondary,
Probably more than half.
the secondary
Okay.
line's going
To every house.
to every house.
It's not underground.
houses, yeah. So how would we communicate this to the customer?
That there is this policy in general?
Just that this is available if they suspect a tree is going to fall on their,
Generally, we
Sure.
just get a call no matter what.
okay.
Normally, people call and say, hey, can you do this? And a lot of the time, no, we can't. It's on private property.
So there's no need to kind of put out.
I don't know if we want to,
I don't
Yeah,
think we should put out.
Well, that's what I was kind of wondering, is if it'd be worth,
Okay.
if the intent of this is to
Okay.
to improve our
That makes sense.
operation in the long term, that seems like the kind of thing we'd want to let people know, hey, if you think there's a problem, let us know, we
Generally-
can look at it. I mean, we might not be able to get to it right away or whatever, but just.
I hear what you're saying, but generally speaking, people that are worried about a dead tree or something coming down on their line, call us no matter what. I think that's just human nature. Like, they don't want to lose power either.
Mhm.
Would you
Except for
guys,
that one house, I guess.
would you guys agree, or?
Mhm.
Do we
Well,
have
they knew, they actually asked us to take it down at first. We
Oh.
said, well, we don't have anything to do this. This is
Really
on you.
good, okay.
We've handled every situation differently, and most of the time
Yeah.
our stance was we don't trim trees on private property because we didn't have any indemnification or waiver. And the tree actually, now it was just a limb and we were able to restore service.
Okay.
So this is, yeah, preemptive, preventative stuff, but in a way we are reacting to a unique situation that happened. And it's like, hey, we don't have anything to really cover this, and we could see it happening again.
So do we have areas where our lines are on private property such that a tree could take out service to a whole bunch of people? Or is it mostly just taking out service to like a handful or fewer?
Handful.
Just to individual houses.
Mostly.
Okay.
So this policy really just kind of set a policy in place that we're kind of taking care of as it is. We just are going to clarify what we.
Clarifies what we can or can't do and how we go about doing that. And the legal document that if we were to take down a tree, everybody knows where Lowell and Power stands in terms of liability.
And that legal document still has to be drafted.
Yeah, I have not spent any attorney dollars until this would have been adopted.
Maybe the one thing that we could add would just be a note that the trees will be removed per an agreement with the property owner. So it sounds like there's a lot of conditions that may be present, such as do they want the wood or not, do they, you know. how much,
Well,
when would they be there, I don't know, just something, because we talked about it, well, we can put this in the contract or put this in the contract, and maybe we just say that the trees will be removed per an agreement with the, instead of just saying like with the permission, but per the agreement
Yeah.
between the light power and the.
So do you think
property
this
owner.
second to last paragraph is not enough in order for Lowell Light Power to perform tree trimming maintenance? The property owner must sign a waiver to indemnify Lowell Light Power of any potential damage? We actually talked about a waiver, but do you think that needs to be more detailed?
I don't think it needs more detail, it's just in terms of like, it sounds like we don't necessarily do, I guess it's so small, maybe it is okay like that. I was just thinking of like, maybe mainly just like the example with the removing debris, whether we take tree or not, or what
Like-
constitutes, that was good, I'm happy kind of thing.
Like
You don't
Lowell
wanna
Light
kind of go
Power
in and,
will negotiate, like instead of, dispose of, Lowell Light Power will negotiate with the homeowner, what the remains or whatever.
Well, my fear is this, I'm afraid that that we will get a big windstorm like we did a long time ago. And I don't want to have to tell Lowell to sit back and go, well, Lowell Light Power is supposed to clean this up out of my yard. That's what I'm worried about.
Well, if that
I'm
happens, we're
worried
gonna
that
be
they're
restoring
expect
power
us
no
to be
matter
their
what.
tree trimming people.
Mhm.
That's, and that's not what we're there for.
Well, I think
What-
though,
what's
the
the-
sole discretion of light and power is a key part of this, so I think that's there, and I guess I see what you're saying, though, Steve, about maybe just that whole indemnity thing is enough to kind of where you can clarify what constitutes, acceptable. So is it acceptable to leave branches, is it acceptable to do whatever?
Here's my suggestion. I think we're saying, yes, proceed
Yes.
with this. But I think that we should, because of the legalities, the identified low light power, is to run this policy by our legal, because you're gonna have them make up a form that they sign anyway, but they might say, like Dick Went might say, you probably should say this, or you probably should say that,
Right.
and then bring that back to the board.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're getting a consensus from the board saying, yes, we think it's appropriate, but we have a few little questions, run it by Dick, and Dick says, yep, this is great, just the way you have it, or if he says, no, you should add this, and then bring that back to us along with the form that we're gonna use. How does that sound to the rest of the board?
It'd be nice to see all that laid out.
Okay,
I agree. Thank you.
makes sense.
Cart or horse? A horse.
All right, we will bring something back. Third action item tonight is our updates to policy 5-5, customer charges. Policy 5-5 spells out what we charge for different types of services and chargers and fees to our customers, and it has been more than 3 years since we have updated this policy. As you know, wages change, and we had an IBEW union contract that resulted in a significant increase to the lineman wages, which impacts many of these charges. So Megan, Julie, and I sat down a couple weeks ago with the current rates and factored in the increase that the line staff will be receiving on July 1st of this year to get new totals for all of these charges. So the first charge is a broken meter seal, and we wanted to add a pulled meter. So really what a meter seal is the lineman could have put a seal on the meter, and we want to go, if we want to make sure people aren't tampering with that meter, if we suspect that somebody is. In the past, people might be able to reset their demand or do funny things with their meter. It's a lot less likely now. So they would cut that seal, do something with their meter. Does that make sense? Well, now everybody is AMI, and we have found that electricians or local contractors actually sometimes pull their meter, which A, isn't safe, and B, they should be calling us to do. We have to go investigate and ask what they're doing, and Mark and Ryan usually give them a nice pep talk and let them know that they shouldn't be doing that. So we would like to add / pulled meter to this, because it really is the same thing, what's going on, and then increase that fee from $25 to $35. The disconnect, reconnect fee for non-payment after hours, and the disconnect, reconnect fee for non-payment during business hours. This is just a reflection of the actual cost for us to take care of these two items with our new rates. The meter set or read-in fee and the new account or customer relocation administration fee, these go hand in hand for, not for forever, but since I've been here and before that, these two charges were both set at $20. In reality, most people we don't incur significant expense or time reading somebody's meter now. Yes, we have the portal we're paying for, yes, we have that initial meter cost, but really it only takes us a minute, where in the past we'd actually have to go roll a truck, et cetera, et cetera. So we're proposing eliminating that fee and only having a new account or account relocation fee of $30. So these two fees are always charged to customers, so customers are always getting $40. They'll actually be seeing a 25% reduction going forward to a total of $30. A return check / payment, this is a pass-through from our bank, and actually, you might say, well, our NSF charges only $25. Actually, they try to pass it through more than once, and each time they try to pass it through costs additional money. So it ends up costing us all in $40. So this is just a pass-through, we're really not making any money. Testing a meter at customer's request. Yep.
Can you go back to where it's service call?
Oh, service call.
After hours, weekends, holidays, is that just a flat 100 or is it $100 per hour?
We should relabel that as per,
I mean, again, if it's a service call and if they're out there for 4 hours or whatever, $100 is not, I don't know. I guess that's my question. What is a service call? And is it?
Yeah, what is it? What would, that wouldn't be.
I don't know if we've ever billed a service call. Have we, Megan?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thinking about it, probably should have thought about this more prior to the meeting. I don't know what a service call would be. I think we could even just eliminate that and keep that as other service work not listed, and just charge actual time and materials instead of a minimum. Does that make sense? So, proposing eliminating that charge. Megan, you take care of AR. Have you billed anybody for a service, just a straight service call?
No.
Okay.
So nobody that's just built something and says, I wanna get in the house before Christmas and I know everybody's closed, but could you come out here and just throw a line? That's what I assumed that was about.
Maybe like a meter, whatever, a meter set or whatever, say it's 2 o'clock or Christmas, whatever, somebody gets there and they're all set up, hey, we're here, they gotta be there to do it.
We likely would have billed
Okay.
them for just other service work not listed in the past.
Okay.
So we can just eliminate that and just consider that other service work, and we'll just bill actual time and materials. Testing a meter at a customer's request, this is just a pass-through cost from Steve's meter service. Megan called Steve's, and this is what he charges for a single phase.
So he goes out to the house and tests that?
I don't know.
Or are we pulling a meter and handing it to him, or?
We haven't even done that since we've had
Yeah,
meters here.
Yeah,
we would-
haven't.
If they wanted it changed out in the past, we would change it out, Steve would pick it up here and test it, it would come back and then that meter would go back.
So there would be some overhead that we wouldn't be accounting for. Then other service work not listed, and again, this potentially could be if somebody did want to do their own tree trimming, we're taking down a wire after hours, or, for example, we just helped, I mean, we took care of Virgin's broadband, a good chunk of their work, for the fiber install that they have through town. This would be other service work not listed, so anything else that we may do, I mean, we do service work for the city with street lighting. We never charge the chamber because it's in our benevolence, but we hang banners or whatever have you.
So, explain to me the difference. I know it says, for nonprofit, actual labor and material costs, not including overhead labor costs, and other service work for profit organizations, actual time and material costs, including overhead labor costs.
So the only difference is, I'm proposing charge, including overhead costs, FICA, pension, health, dental, any other overhead costs that are associated with an employee's wage, that we would charge a for-profit organization. We would not charge those to a not-for-profit organization, just to give those people a break.
So is there a number that I mean, obviously at one time there was a number, $58.25 per hour, and the other was, I mean, that we're looking at the same $58.25 per hour.
In the
What that
past,
was,
we did not
what
have
they
two
were.
different categories.
Okay,
We only had one category, other service work not listed, and it was $58.25 minimum. for
so
labor
you're
costs.
breaking it down to nonprofit and for-profit.
For-profit, yes.
And would we have an actual amount? Would we know beforehand, or?
We would likely always give someone a quote of who's gonna do the job and what their rate's going to be. In the past, and this I think was primarily for like the city, we just billed a flat rate because then they had some expectancy of who was gonna do the job. Does that make sense? But, I mean, learning from this, like Virgin's broadband, or big service projects that we could potentially get involved in, if we have some of our higher earners on there, all of a sudden we really are losing money by having them and just charging this flat rate. So I'm proposing just actual time and materials, just a pass-through cost of what it costs us to do business.
Why wouldn't we just have like a billable rate, I guess, for that type of thing? I mean, why would it matter who got assigned to the job? I mean, I can see why it matters in that people have different pay rates, but if I'm on the other end of it, I'm saying, well, just send me your cheap guys then, I don't wanna pay that much, or, I mean, rather than even having to deal with that, why not just say, here's our rate that we charge for this type of labor?
Teen
And-
covers you better.
Yeah, time and material.
Time and material is, that's standard in the industry, whether you're building or whatever, but it's a more efficient way of covering exactly what it costs you to do that particular project. So if you were $90 an hour and you were doing it for $70 an hour, somebody's gonna squawk. Well, if you're doing it for $70 an hour, then you're only billing them that. See what I'm saying? So it all depends on, you know, at the time, what it's gonna cost to do a particular thing. The T&M, at the end of the day, just protects you a lot better.
Okay,
Because
yeah,
there's
so
always, there's
not
always
what I'm
gonna
used
be,
to it.
there's always gonna be something that, not that you guys would ever forget, but you potentially say, oh, well, we need this to finish. So it covers you.
Well, I'm not saying about a fixed, like, dollar amount, just, but I like a fixed rate, like a labor rate. As opposed to, because weren't you saying like having a different rate depending on which people were working the job?
That's what I'm proposing.
Why couldn't we just have a,
Basically,
I mean, it's-
what you're saying is,
But, I mean, what
When you have
happens
a job
if
takes
Ryan's
longer, you
needed for every job, and Ryan's cost with overhead is more than the rate that we have?
yeah. Well, I
So
guess
we're
it depends
losing.
on how many categories we have, but if it's not, I just didn't want it based on every single person, everyone's getting a different
No,
pay
the
rate.
idea is time and materials is, at the end of the day, we have a very good accounting team.
Mhm.
And they're gonna figure out exactly what that cost
Yep.
to send whoever it was out. And it's more fair for the end user as well. I
Mhm.
mean, if, you know, the lower cost lineman can come out and solve your problem, even if it's a Sunday, then great, pay the lower cost.
Okay,
And the nice thing about this is it also adds material cost in,
right.
which was not included, so if you need, 10 feet of wire, rather than waiting for the
Yeah.
customer, rather than waiting to call
Yeah,
an electrician, licensed electrician to come in, they might have it on the truck
yeah,
with the material.
yeah. Yeah, T&M pretty common even in my industry, but typically the labor rate part is fixed for a few classes, but I guess we have much bigger projects, so it's easier to do that. As long as it's easy for you guys to do, I guess that's fine.
It's really not hard with our work order system.
Mhm.
The guys who are on a job have a work order number. That work order number gets assigned to their hours in payroll. It flows right to the work order, and Megan's able to see exactly how many dollars
Mhm.
are on that work order for material or time.
Okay,
So I agree with the time and materials approach in general, but particularly for the first three items and then number 5 for the new account, new location, things are going up by $10, $5. Are we proposing this because of the principle of inflation, or is this legitimately going to pad and help expenses for the increased wages of the linemen?
This is really reflecting the cost to do those type of, and to answer, maybe, it might be fair for you to all wonder, well, why is a disconnect, reconnect fee for non-payment simply not time and actual time for that? This is pretty common in the industry to have a flat rate for this, because you don't want one neighbor
mhm.
saying, oh, I'm disconnected, and they sent out this lineman apprentice. And, well, this guy was on call when I was shut off, and now he costs more, and then it's a PR nightmare. Do you see what I'm saying? Service calls are just unique. The customer's requesting this type of service, and they know going in.
So these are just the common service calls, and then anything else that we can't
Correct.
bucketize, we,
And we're looking at basically a 10% increase on those disconnect
Most
reconnect
of them,
fees. The broken meter, pulled meter is a little bit higher, but maybe that's to discourage somebody from pulling the meter.
You have to realize it has been over 3 years
Right.
since
So
these
that's
have been
roughly
reviewed.
3%
Well, it's
per
just-
year, it's not unreasonable.
And, we did have a 13.5% increase just last year to our lineman rate, and another 3.5 this year. So these fees still aren't keeping exactly up with that.
mhm. Well, I don't think it's so much the percent, it's just when they evaluate how much it costs to do that work, that one happened to go up more. Maybe in the past it was undervalued.
Okay. With, the only thing that I understand is we're gonna remove service call after hour weekends and holidays of the 100, actually just completely remove that.
Correct.
Other than that, everything else stays what is proposed, and I would entertain a motion to approve that policy of 5.5.
I will move that we approve policy 5-5 with the exception of the service call charge, which would be eliminated. In favor of it.
And I'll support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Alrighty, fourth item tonight, potential, and I say the word potential, because I know this is, in the past, has been a fairly sensitive subject, so I don't want to come across as arrogant by any means. But a potential update to policy 5-15 procurement. That policy spells out the maximum authority limit for low light and power staff, and by that, it'll always come to me. I don't let other staff have the same spending limit as I do, just for internal control processes and things like that. But our current limit is $10,000, and as far as staff can tell, this policy has been in place since fiscal year 2003, which is July of '02 through June of '03. Meanwhile, revenues, expenses, cost of materials have increased significantly during this time, thus eroding that spending power that the board over 15 years ago gave staff. I asked Megan to put together some data showing this. So Megan, if you can go down to really the table, you can see that operating revenue since, and I didn't go back to fiscal year '03, we didn't have those audits digitally available, so we just went back to fiscal year '09. Revenue has increased from 5.7 million to almost 8.7 million. And spending limit as a percentage of revenue has gone from 0.17% to 0.12%. Doesn't seem like much, but that's a 33% erosion. And operating expenses, taking out purchase power and depreciation, have increased as well. And that spending limit as a percent of operating expenses has gone from 0.63% to 0.39%, so that's a reduction of 38%. Compared to operating expenses. And the CPI, and this is just the general inflationary data, in July of '02, that CPI number was 180.1. In February of '18, the most readily available data, the CPI number was 248.991, so that was a 38.25% increase in the cost of general goods. And I've talked with Perry about this many times, and I think the rest of the board knows, it's efficient for light and power staff to buy poles in full truckloads. We're at the point right now where every single time we're going to order poles, we'll have to come to the board for approval. And even though that's just an essential utility item that's needed for the course of business that the board's going to approve, staff does not have the ability to buy poles at this point. And there have been large transformers that we need as spares or just for different services where we don't have the ability to purchase those large transformers. This came, I mean, I've thought about this for a while. It was either Mark Beauchamp or Peter Hafner said it wouldn't be uncommon for a utility our size. They've seen upwards of $25,000 spending limit authority. I know that's a huge jump, and I know this is a PR type of issue too. I don't want people to think that light power staff is spending things out of control, so I understand it's sensitive. But with all that being said, my ultimate recommendation is that some sort of increase is needed. Kind of more of a joke, but you know, I doubt that 10,000 was our limit in 1896 when we started. It's had to be increased over time, and eventually it's going to need to be increased. It's just how inflation works. Since it's been around for 15 years at least, it's my recommendation that we take a look at this and have some sort of increase, and ultimately I'm going to let the board decide on what they feel comfortable with, if anything.
So I'm really happy to see the table in the charts too, because I wrote some comments about, well, what percent of these various revenues and income and all that, okay, there it is. But the other question that I had was like how many such purchases will exceed 10,000, or in the past I should say, and then how much value do they add up to be? I mean, because I kind of look at it as, if we're going to try to pick a target, I don't want to just say, well, 15 sounds good because that's another round number, because how did we come to 10 in the first place in 2003? I mean, it seems kind of random. And
Probably
I guess
was very random, actually.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure it felt right to folks who made the decision at the time, and that's usually pretty good, I think, but I was kind of thinking that maybe we should target what are we trying to control or guard against? And one thought I had was, well, how many purchases are made each year? So how much are we inconveniencing, you and your staff by having to bring purchases routinely to the board, versus then how much value do those add up to be? So if it's if you say, well, we only made 20 such purchases, but they add up to, 50% of our revenue, well, then it's probably important to keep that limit lower, because, or depending on how much of that do we want to control, I guess that's the other part. How much, because really what it's about is just limiting exposure to things that weren't necessarily, to big purchases that could have a big impact on the power that weren't necessarily aligned with the direction the board wanted to go. So I was wondering, is there a way we could kind of figure out something, some kind of a target that we could?
If we look retroactively, I don't know if that's gonna be a good telltale sign with all the projects we have coming up. That the board knows about, what 5-year plans approved. It's all infrastructure that fairly confident with engineering proposals that have already been accepted, we need to buy materials. But we've come to the board now for capacitor banks, relays, materials from power line supply, capacitor banks on 2 occasions, so I don't wanna give you a number off the cuff. I could probably give you a good projection going forward based on our projects, what routine materials we're gonna have to buy and
Yeah,
how many times that would come about.
because I guess I'd be curious, like, what, because maybe that routine purchase might actually drive the number too. If you're finding that you make many purchases that are 18,000 or less, then maybe we need to set a limit at 20 instead of 15. Yeah, but I guess at this point, I just don't have any idea of what 10,000 represents relative to how we operate, and so that's what, it's kind of hard for me to think of a target for this.
My thoughts were, when Steve talked to me about this, was looking at an increase, but looking at some kind of increase with some verbiage that, that it was tied to, essential, what's the word I'm looking for?
Utility materials?
It's something that in order for light and power to function, that we give them that number authority. And I'm gonna use an example, cause we're coming up with, some quotes for carpeting and for different things here in the building. Or like when we were doing, improvements to the building, which really wasn't a necessity to, to get power out to our customers. It was overdue, but again, those types of numbers, those types of things I think should come to the board, as compared to, something that, we have to have this transformer or we have to have this in order to function, or we used it and we need the backup, cause who knows how long, that could blow tomorrow and there's such a delay. So I was trying to come up with, or trying to figure out some kind of verbiage that, if it was essential to the day-to-day operations of low light and power, then we increase it to 15,000 to 20,000 or whatever. If it's not a requirement for the day-to-day operations of low light and power, anything over 10,000 or whatever, those things need to come in front of the board. Again, and I'm just throwing different ideas out. I'm not saying that that's the way it should be, I'm just throwing, when we had that
I remember there was
discussion.
one time, I think it was like power, there was some discussion about trying to, something was spent, but it might have been we came retroactively to say, hey, we had to spend this because the purchase was needed at the time, but I can't remember saying something about, well, I thought that was part of an approved capital project already, and so did we really have to kind of reapprove it? If we've already approved, hey, this was a capital project that had these 5 itemized big things in it, and this was one of them, and why would we have to kind of reapprove it again, even though we hadn't approved the purchase, we just approved the project itself. But maybe that's one way to put it, if there's something that's already part of a
Budgeted.
approved capital project, and you need some equipment and it was there saying, hey, this transformer is gonna be 20,000, and we're aware of it, then why not, as long as it's like within, 10% of that price, or something like that. I don't wanna make it too tricky either, that's the other problem.
What I wouldn't want is for routine things that need to get done throughout a month to have to be waited on until the beginning of the next month to actually do, which could decrease efficiency.
I would say that in actuality, there are many things that we wait specifically for the board meeting. Every time you see approval for equipment purchase for a 5-year plan item, we've known about that for potentially weeks. We're just waiting for your guys' approvals to actually purchase and order it. And that's gonna happen all the time going forward. We know the engineering's been accepted, we know we budgeted for that project. I get a breakdown of every single projected cost for that project. And I know going in, if the capacitor banks are at-budget or not. But yeah, whenever you see that, it might not be essential, like oh, if we don't get this, the lights are gonna turn out, but after 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, depending on the timing of the board meetings, we're waiting just for the board's approval, even though, I don't wanna ever put words in your mouth, but very likely the board's gonna approve that. They've already approved the engineering, they've already approved the plan, they've already approved the budget. Now, just for formality, we're bringing this to you to approve.
Can you, ask staff to go back and say over the last 3-year period, what were the dollar amounts of approvals at the board meetings? So if we find that 50% were between 10 and 15,000, then maybe that gives us a guideline to go to 15,000. If 50% were, if it was only 10%, then we get an idea what, what we're actually talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was
Something,
gonna say.
just some simple
It'd be nice
spreadsheet
to
that said,
have-
okay, so this is what we've done over the last few years, and so this would be a good target to move that number to.
And while keeping that in mind too, you were saying our upcoming expenses for the 5-year plan are going to buck those trends a little bit because they're going to be larger than usual, or will that be the new normal?
I think it's
for the
kind of
next
both,
decade?
but we don't always have a 5-year plan, but prices are going up anyway just by the very nature of inflation, so. It's kind of,
In
the
the
5-year
past,
plan is
a
compounding.
lot of our
the
money
issue.
has gone to the generation department, and it's just like large ticket items that might take Barney 3 to 6 months. Now it's 3, 4, 5 projects working in conjunction with each other that we're gonna be doing over the course of years, and after the 5-year plan, there's further projects we already talked about our engineers with that we can, this isn't the end once we have this is just the start. So there'll be material purchases ongoing for potentially the next 8, 9 years. And these projects are likely gonna be approved by the board, the budget's going to be approved, it's just materials within those projects are always, and we can give an idea. I mean, I can come back to the board and say, this is how many are gonna fall between 10 and 15. But the other funny thing about this is, and this is probably a question I'd just like all of your opinion on, is it the total invoice or is it per item? That's a $10,000 limit. For example, meters, they're $100 each. If I order 5 of them, it's gonna cost me $500. But if I wanna order 100 of them, now it's gonna cost me $10,000.
Well,
You see what I mean? But it almost, just
Well, I think the intent is per
unit.
per purchase, but, because I remember there was some discussion about, and I can't remember if this was with Greg or with city when I was on city council or what, but someone was talking about, well, you could just as easily split the order into 2 5,000 purchases and not ask you guys anything, but obviously that's not the intent of this. And so.
Has that happened where you worked around this number? And made it
Since I've been
separate?
here, yes.
Okay.
We try not to do that.
And I think usually it's mentioned when it happens, but I remember there's also the one where there's like a poll purchase or something where you could get more money with a certain amount, but those polls we're gonna need for several years. So we're kind of like stocking up a bit, so it's like, hey, it's okay to spend more now to save money later, and maybe that's a good thing to bring to the board. It's like, if we only need, X number of transformers, we're gonna buy 3 times that. Is that really what we want, just to get a good deal? To have 20 years of inventory, or is it, that's the question, but that's where I kind of think that what would really help is just what are we typically doing for these purchases, like Jeff was saying, over the last few years. Just so we get an idea what kind of impact this is having. I mean, if it only happens 3 times a year, then it's like, that's not that much of an impact, but if it's.
Well, the impact is you're potentially running a month.
Yeah, then you could delay a project by a month, so
You
that's
see
the
what I'm
other.
saying? Like, if it, I don't look at it as it might only be, I would say 4 to 6, but I look at that as, okay, that's a month later, that's a month later,
Right.
that's a month later, that's a month later. Not that there isn't other things to do, but ultimately, I've told Mark this since I've been general manager, I'd like to get timeline, what everybody's doing this week, and get as definitive as possible.
What was King Millings wire? What'd that come in at?
I wanna
That
say,
was over 10 grand.
I wanna say,
Yeah, we had to
I wanna say it was 30, there was a switch and wire, but I think one was maybe
But
20 something,
technically,
38.
what we did was